If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and welcome to another exciting show. I've got a great group on here for Coach's Corner tonight, and we'll talk about them in just a minute. And a little bit later on in the show, I've got an author and LCPC, which is a licensed clinical practitioner, if you will, Robert Moylan, who's going to be coming on. He's an author as well of a book that he's just introduced through Amazon.com called the Mastering the Psychology of Golf with Emotional Core Therapy. We're going to talk a little bit about that. It's a very interesting book. I just finished it here just the other week, and a lot of great stuff. We're going to talk about that. But let me just remind everybody, of course, we are live every Thursday night from 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time. That's 7 to 9 for you on the East Coast, and 4 to 6, I believe, on the West Coast. But thank you for joining us tonight live. And if you want to, for those of you that aren't familiar, maybe you're listening for the first time, just to remind everybody you want to pass this link around. Easiest way to find the show, of course, is go to blogtalkradio.com, type in Golf Talk Live up in the search key, and that'll get you to the show. And if you want to pass the link, the actual full link is www.blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live. And if you send that link around, they can keep it in their browser or in their bookmark, that link, and they can tune into the show every Thursday if they want. While they're traveling, you can do it on your iPhone, iPad, doesn't really matter. You don't necessarily have to be on a regular computer. You can do it from any mobile device anywhere around the world, actually. We have lots of listeners tuning in, not just here in the United States and up in Canada, but literally all around the globe tuning into the program every week. So thank you very much for doing that. Also, if you want to speak to any of the guests during the show, you're certainly welcome to do so. You can reach us at area code 646-716-4667. Again, that number is 646-716-4667. Or you can email questions or comments to me personally about the show at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And if you're somebody in the golf profession, you're interested in coming on the show, wanting to be a guest, certainly love to have you come on and share some of your thoughts and ideas with some of the listeners here. And you can do so as well by emailing me personally at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And, of course, as most of you know, I update through social media every week on Facebook at facebook.com/golftalkliveblog. Don't forget to add blog on the end. And while you're there, make sure that you like the page if you haven't already done so. I appreciate all the new likes. And also on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. My handle is Ted and Buck CEO. That's CEO in capital letters. Again, thank you for all the followers there. So I update the shows, of course, every week there. And you can visit my website at www.golftalkliveblog.com. And again, thank you for joining us this evening hopefully you're going to enjoy this show tonight. We've got a little bit different twist on Coach's Corner tonight, and let me bring out the panel. And as I said, a little bit later on, I'm going to be joined by Robert Moylan, the author of Mastering the Psychology of Golf with Emotional Core Therapy. He's going to be talking about a new book that he's released this year. It's actually his third book along the same lines, but this one, of course, is dealing more for the golfers, you guys, that is. It's definitely something you want to get a copy of, and certainly tune in tonight to the broadcast and listen a little bit more. But as I mentioned, we've got three great coaches tonight and teacher professionals coming on. All of them have been here before a number of times, both as guests, but also as panelists before. And my good buddy, Mr. John Hughes, PGA Master Professional, and also the Secretary of North Florida PGA Section, and the owner of course, his own business, John Hughes Golf, down in Orlando, Florida. John will be joining us here in just a second. Pete Buchanan, he's the founder and director of instruction, owner of Plain Simple Golf, LLC, which houses the Plain Simple Golf Circuit and Simple Swing Repeater Training Brace. Another great professional in the business. He's going to be joining us here in just a second. And certainly last but not least, rounding out the panel, is Michael Wheeler. He's a PGA certified professional, both for teaching and coaching, right balance technology instructor. He's also trained in Flight Scope and KVEST Level 2 certified. And he's also the director of instruction at the Bellwood Golf and Country Club in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Gentlemen, welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Evening, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
Great to be here.
You're welcome. Now, Michael, just real quick, I know you've got a few other things. I didn't read every single one of them out. Just very quickly, what were some of the other things that you've recently added to your repertoire?
You hit a lot of them on the head. I've recently attended Dr. Kwan's golf biomechanist certification down in Texas. Got to spend a few days with Dr. Kwan in his lab, as well as during the seminar with Rob Holding and a few other really great instructors. And then, the other thing I didn't mention to you, but we're working on the Flight Scope Master certification right now.
Wow.
So hopefully that will be out soon. So we're working on the material for that and putting that together. So hopefully, everybody who's listening, golf professional wise, you'll be getting some information about that pretty soon.
Wow. So you've added a few more things, as they say, to your repertoire of being a teaching professional and certified PGA professional. And I know that the students are certainly going to benefit from all of your additional skills. And you're also, as I see here, you're a member of the Philadelphia PGA Instruction Committee. Is that correct?
Yes, the Instruction Committee and the Education Committee. I'm kind of a certification and volunteer junkie, so I kind of do as much as I can.
Well, that's good. It's always good to add a little bit and hone up your skills, as they say. All right, guys, as I was mentioning to you off air, I just want to let everybody know we're going to do something a little bit different tonight on the panel. Rather than sort of fielding some of the questions or picking necessarily a specific topic to cover, I thought that we would take some of our experiences as professionals and describe how we would handle certain situations. And sort of to keep things, as I said, professional, you can or can't. It's up to you if you want to use your specific client names, or we can just refer to as them as client, or we can use the name Bob, whichever you feel. Certainly don't want to offend anybody or throw anybody under the bus. So that I'll leave that up to you. Pardon me. I'll go first, just to keep things fair, since I know that this was something that I really just sort of sprung on you guys last night. I decided to do something a little bit different, and that'll also give you guys a little chance to compose your thoughts and on what you might like to say for your own scenarios. And also, what I'm going to do is give you obviously an opportunity, in addition to adding your own scenarios to the mix. If you have any comments or questions, or you want to add to anything that anybody else on the panel talks about, certainly by all means. Now, as I said, I'm going to start with my scenario here. This was a gentleman that I don't work with right now, only because he's back up in Canada. I do hear from him from time to time, but I worked with him for a little while. He's an executive. In fact, he's a CEO of a major corporation in Canada. And he always struggled with, they, of course, had an annual corporate event, and he would quite often get invited to other events and stuff, and struggled in really three areas of his game that he wanted to improve on. And he asked me to sort of create a plan of action, if you will, to help him overcome some of these issues. And here they are. One of them, which really is very common among a lot of golfers, and that was anxiety and stress. Just an example, first tee jitters, that sort of situation. Also, maybe hitting over water is another one that a lot of, and even some struggle with their bunker play. So I wanted to create a situation, seeing that he was an executive and I knew that he would be under a lot of stress anyways. I wanted to heighten the stress a little bit and put him under the gun. And the reason why I did this, one, I knew him very well so I could get away with it. But also I wanted him to be able to handle really any situation that he was given, whether it was on the course or off the course. So here's what I did. I organized the lesson. I set it up, weeks in advance, and I said, okay, and I'm going to tell you his name, his first name anyways, Brian. And so what I said to Brian was, I said, Brian, we're going to set up a lesson, but unbeknownst to him, we did it on a weekend, and as I said, I knew him quite well and been involved with his business over the years. I invited a number of his coworkers. In fact, I invited pretty much his whole executive team to join us for a few holes, unbeknownst, as I said, to him. So he didn't know that. And the purpose I did is I wanted to have a small audience to be able to observe what he was doing throughout the whole session. And we had slated several hours. We didn't play a full 18 or anything. We played about, I think it was about 6 holes, if I'm not mistaken, but then we did some range time as well. And here's what I did is I had him go to the range first, and we proceeded to go through, as traditionally, sort of the bag, if you will, while his coworkers watched him hit balls, both good and bad. And so that sort of ramped up the pressure a little bit because he wasn't used to having an audience as much. And I wanted to do that because, for a specific reason, I wanted him to be able to focus on the task at hand while having others observing. And I'm not talking spread out in the range. I'm talking as though it was like a small gallery. And I wanted him to feel that pressure, but I wanted him to be able to focus on his task and be able to block that out, much like the pros often do. So here's what I did is I put him through various difficult scenarios, and I made him come up with the solution. So we would, as an example, we might imagine that he had to hit it over water to a green, or maybe over a bunker to land on the green, and we would sort of visualize the shot, and then I would get him to come up with what he felt was a solution to do that. And the idea was to keep his mind focused on the task at hand and not the people that were surrounding him, as I mentioned. Now, what I did do, and there was some cooperation from them, is they were certainly allowed to, within reason, make some noise as long as they weren't not too distractive. They couldn't certainly do anything in his backswing. I didn't want anybody to get, shanked with a ball or anything like that. But they were certainly allowed to talk or mingle amongst themselves in order to have some distraction. And it proved to be a very effective scenario, and he actually did quite well. Now, one of the things that I did also do with him is he had a lot of difficulties struggling with his approach shots. So what we did is when we went out in the course, he had, as I said, a lot of difficulties with hitting greens, and so we went to a specific green on this course that we were working at on this day, and I picked a green specifically that had a lot of undulations. And what I did was, rather than stepping back, 100 yards or so, and having him hit direct shots to the green, what I did was I made him start on the green first and putt 3, 5, 10, and 20-foot putts in order to help build a little bit of confidence. Then what I would do is I would back up from there 5, 10, and 15 yards off the green and have him hit chip shots to the same degree. Lastly, I had him hit pitch shots 25, 45, 65, 75, 100 yards off the green. I'd have him hit anywhere from 3 to 5 balls. Now, obviously, we did it at a time that the course was not busy, and they actually had 3 sets of 9, so I was able to go on a back 9 that wasn't as busy on that particular day. So I had a little extra time available. The reason why I started him with the putting was, again, very simple. I wanted to give him a certain level of confidence to start the session with, and this lasted probably in total about 35 minutes. And I wanted him to get also an understanding of how the green looked. Now, obviously, he's not going to have that situation when he's playing on a different course, but I wanted him to understand, in this particular case, what he was going to be faced with when he approached. So where traditionally he might, some people might go straight for the flag, some people might try to hit for the fat of the green. I want him to understand what the green looked like. So when he was playing his home course, maybe he would have a better idea of what some of those greens were. And I'm going to tell you the last one in a second, what I did with him, which involved consistency. But I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to sort of chime in if you have any comments or any questions with respect to what I've done so far. John, if you want to start, or anybody. Nothing?
Sounds like you created a pretty significant scenario for him already. So I think you're going along the right way with the anxiety and stressful nature that you're trying to get him over.
Well, and exactly, Pete. And the reason why I did that was, I knew that being a CEO of a company, he's under a lot of stress and certainly a lot of anxiety. And a lot of people get out on the golf course and allow that to sort of creep in. And I wanted to create, as I said, a scenario and a situation where he would sort of be forced to deal with that. A lot of times people try to shove it aside and try to ignore it. I didn't want him to ignore it purposely. I wanted him to deal with it head on. So rather than sort of giving him all the answers of how he should hit the shots or I forced him to use his own imagination and his own ability. So as an example, if we were out in the course, as I said, and he had to hit a 75-yard pitch shot, I didn't want to just say, okay, here's, set up this way, here's what you want to do, where do you want to go? I wanted him to think and come up with his own strategy on what he needed to do. So as I said, if there was a bunker or water in play, I wanted him to use his own thoughts and format, if you will, in order to create that. The last one I did was consistency, and I know this might seem a little unorthodox, but you'll understand at the end when I explain to you how effective it was. This was something that we did on the range. He had a difficulty with consistency. I know there's a lot of tools out there, a lot of drills that can be done, but this is one I've done, and I've actually used this on myself over the years when I've sometimes struggled a little bit. I teed up every shot on the range 1 inch from the ground and made him hit the ball without moving the tee. And I had him use irons only. He was not allowed to use woods. It was strictly his iron play that he was struggling with. And the reason why I did that is I wanted him to be able to take the ball, hit the ball, strike it, removing the tee. And what I mean by that is I didn't want him to take the tee, could not come out of the ground. And what I did was I used a shorter tee so that it didn't have a lot of stability to begin with. So in other words, he clipped the ball off the tee. After he would hit a certain number of shots, I would move the tee slightly a little closer to the ground and have him continue the drill. The purpose of this drill, why I did it in the format I did it, is I wanted him to focus on one thing and one thing only. A lot of people, even on the range, what they'll do is they'll start tinkering around, they'll start playing and messing with things, or start focusing too much on where their body's going and so forth. And we've all seen it. Guys out in the range beating ball after ball, and they're going all over the place because they don't have it. And I would make him go through his routine for each shot. And ultimately what I did was I put the tee all the way down to the ground, and then eventually I removed the tee. And by the time I was done this was another probably about 20-minute exercise. By the time the tee was removed, he was hitting the ball first, making good solid contact, taking a divot afterwards, which is what I wanted him to do. And again, the purpose of using the tee and nothing else was to get him to focus on that one specific task, was getting that ball off the tee without affecting the tee itself. And he actually did very well. I was surprised. Initially, he had a few struggles, but once the exercise was done, he was hitting the ball much better with his irons. Now, the driver was something we did a little bit differently later on, but that was essentially the drill that I used for that, and it became very effective in his case. And I've used it for others, and I've used it for myself. So I want to give you guys an opportunity. If you have comments, Pete, I know you made a comment, but if you have comments on what I did, if you would have done something different, if you think it was something that you could see being effective or not being effective, you're welcome to make whatever comments you want. And again, either John.
Sorry about
Go
that.
ahead.
I was on mute before, and I apologize when you called on me. I've done the exact same thing, but a little differently for people with anxiety, CEOs, high-end VIPs, that kind of thing. They are used to stress and anxiety. I've had a couple come through golf schools where their biggest anxiety was their member guest tournament teeing off the first hole because it's lined with people. And we've literally pulled people out to replicate the gallery. He had, in years past, hit people in the gallery, just a cold top shank dead right into somebody. So every day as he teed off on the first hole for his on-course portion, we found employees, we found members, we found anybody we could to line that first hole. It worked. A couple months later, we get the email back, wow, did that work? It was great. And what you're talking about is simulation and being able to simulate the same stress and anxiety that people feel. Anything a client of mine can do to simulate that is huge, because we all feel in great proportion to the greats we see on TV the exact same amount of stress and anxiety level. 3-foot putt to win the club championship, believe it or not, is in proportion to that of, say, Ricky Fowler winning the U.S. Open or somebody else winning the British Open. And once that's conveyed in a simulated way, as you demonstrated, it makes things just so much easier.
Yeah, and the reason why, as I said, it was to create and actually he was quite surprised when a number of his fellow coworkers showed up on that. And as I said, we did it on a Saturday, and so there was no issue of nobody being at work, but. The reason why I did that was for twofold. First off, I could have, had some strangers come, which certainly would have added some anxiety. But there's a lot of pressure sometimes to perform in front of, regardless whether it be golf or other things, in front of people that we know. And these are people that he's going to be playing with, in an upcoming, at that time, an upcoming event, corporate event. And some of them he may play with others. So there's a certain element there. But also, I wanted them to be able to, because I knew they would be comfortable around him to be able to. And as I said, I didn't want them to be jeering or snickering or doing anything that was certainly inappropriate. But I wanted them to certainly make a little bit of background noise, which would certainly simulate sometimes going even to the first tee. There's always somebody digging for golf balls or something. So I wanted them to sort of make some noise so that it would force him, to focus on what it was he was doing and not allow other distractions to come into play. And as an executive, I knew that he's used to doing that in the boardroom or he's used to doing that in his office. But on the golf course, a lot of times they forget that. So he had to sort of get in his own mind, if you will, and say, okay, I'm going to block, much like the pros do. Nicholas used to do it, and a lot of the pros did it that were very mentally focused. They were able to block out what was going on around him, and that's really what I was trying to teach him there. And with the other, the approach shots, it's very easy to, throw a few balls down at different levels and have them do that. But I wanted him, I wanted to paint a picture, if you will, by taking him to the green first, just to use it as an example, to let him see the lie of the land, if you will, and say, okay, this is what your target's going to be. And then I wanted him to remember that, and as we backed up through the different shots, I wanted him to have in mind, okay, how did the green slope? Where was the pin situated? Is it a smart move from this distance to try and get close to the pin, or should I play it safe and go in this area over here? So I wanted to have those options available when we did the approach shots. Now the tee, I know other people have done something similar. I know there's a lot of millions of drills out there that people can do. But I found the tee drill very effective because, again, it focuses on one thing. I don't want people, a lot of times people will focus on so many other different things when they're trying to hit a shot that they get sort of disjointed, if you will, and they're focusing too much on the backswing, how it looks or how it gets into the slot or doesn't get in the slot. And I wanted him to focus on one thing and one thing only, was just to be able to get that ball down the range, if you will, without removing that tee. Now, certainly every shot wasn't going to be perfect, but he was able to make contact as we moved on, and he was able to make good, solid contact. And even though we all know that with iron shots, you're hitting on a descending blow. Initially, he wasn't certainly able to do that very much, but as the tee progressed further down, closer to the ground, and ultimately away, he was able to do that, and he was able to imagine that tee was still there. So he was able to focus on one thing, and that was to pick the ball clean, and then, of course, take a divot afterwards. And it was certainly a success. But any other comments, guys, that you want to make on this? Then I'm going to give you an opportunity to create your own scenarios here.
No, it sounds to me like you did a pretty good job with it. So
okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you, John. I'm going to let you go first, and if you've got a scenario here that you want to share, and then as I said, we'll go Pete and then Michael.
The thing I want to address, I think that every student of the game gets into is not falling into, but starting to believe in one particular method.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, there's sacrifices to be made sometimes. And those sacrifices may not be intended. I know we've had people come to me or any of the other instructors I was working with a particular expectation of what a certain method should or shouldn't provide for them. And it was we had an instructor years ago that had a student come to him and then leave for some unknown reason. The guy disappeared, and they were reacquainted 3 years later at a golf school, at which time the student basically said, hey, I'm really into natural golf now. I hit 95% of my fairways, and I do this, and I want to hit it further, but you can't change my natural golf swing. Well, what people have to understand is that when you are committed to do something a certain way, you're doing it because you see the obvious pluses to it. And
sure.
The minuses have to be there, unfortunately. It's just a balancing act. And this happens quite often. I think there's a lot of people out there listening tonight that believe in certain things a certain way, but yet they're not accomplishing what they're looking to do. So it's really sitting down, having a discussion with your instructor, as we did with this particular person, sort of spelling out the pros and cons to a lot of different things and saying, where are you willing to make some sacrifices? Do you really want to hit 95% of your fairways yet have hybrids or fairway woods into the green, or would you rather have some irons, get that down to, say, 80%, but yet you're now hitting more greens because of that? Ultimately, I think the case scenarios we run into as instructors and students run into it from the other side, and trust me, I've been on that other side numerous times. I haven't taken many lessons. You got to reach that happy medium. You've got to do that before you get to the lesson tee or before you get to the golf course and understand what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then work harmoniously with the person you choose to get that done. And it's grossly unfair to yourself as a golfer not to communicate that to the person you've hired to have that work for you, to hire to make your changes. Because if you're stuck in that one thing, I'd rather teach you that one thing and stick with it because you believe in it. But if there's some ambiguity or some non-agreement, I guess is the best way to say it, it's best to get it out versus harboring those feelings. You'll take those feelings to the golf course with you, and it takes a long time to get rid of them. That particular case scenario probably happens much more often than we probably know of, simply because as instructors it's not communicated to us. We have to sort of pull that out of people as we teach them.
Right. Yeah, and that's a great point. I think that there's certainly a lot of, everybody is certainly might have different methods or different approaches to things. What might work for me may not necessarily work for you, John, or Pete, or Michael. I've certainly found some of the things that I've done. I'm a firm believer in this. I believe in the old KISS theory, and that is basically keep it simple. The last word, of course, being stupid. because I think sometimes, and it's not just in golf, but it's in everyday life, I think sometimes we can make things too difficult. And I like a simpler approach, and I like to do things that are going to cause the other person to think. I don't want somebody just to come to me and say, okay, I want to take a golf lesson, and then me just tell them what to do, because what I might do in the golf course might be different than what you might do. So what I want to try to do is I want to draw out of them their skills and open up, and I may show them some strategies or techniques that have worked for me or worked for others to help them along. But then I want them to be able to take what they see and be able to handle. And that's why, as I mentioned earlier, with the anxiety and the stress, and by the way, there was a dozen associates from his company that came, and I would just like to add, for my own self-gratification, patting on the back, that all 12 of them booked lessons with me afterwards. So I must have done something right if they all did that. But
I was going to ask you, Ted, if they all still work for him. After you did that
actually,
to him.
They do. But yeah, he didn't. But it was really again, it was to prove a point that I wanted him, him to understand, and I think that the lesson that we put together at that particular time caused him to really look inside himself and really pull out his strengths and see the weaknesses that he had. And I certainly helped and educate him along the way, but really he did it himself, and that's really what I wanted to accomplish. Pete, let's go to you. I know that you have, I'm sure, some scenarios or situations that you want to share, and just talk about some of the things that you've had to deal with and how you overcame them.
Well, I'm going to take it a little bit different way. One
Sure.
of the situations we came across when I was with the golf schools, we had a gentleman that came to the school that had a stroke. And he's a left-handed player and had lost pretty much all of the mobility on his right side. And when you look at a situation like that, and especially some of the young teachers that are out there, they may panic as far as looking at what they're going to try to do to get him to hit some golf shots. And basically what I told the staff was, I said, look, this isn't any different than anybody else. It's all face, path, and angle and what we're looking for. We've got to get the contact right. And so we have to look at the controllers. And the lesson that I gave him wasn't any different than what we did with anybody else. And it was pretty surprising to the guys that we were actually able to make that type of the same similar lesson, just concentrating on what we needed to do. We had to do some different things, setting them up a little bit different with the posture, because as a left-handed player, he really couldn't turn on to his right side because he'd lose his balance. So we had to make some accommodations for how we put his feet down, and we did that first of all just to see what were the best scenarios that he could balance by angling his feet a little bit different. And I really wasn't worried about what his feet did, because the feet don't control the ball, because they're really irrelevant. There's other things that are bigger controllers than what the feet are doing. So the fact that his feet had to aim one direction and his shoulders were parallel was not an issue. But,
right.
It was good enough for him because he was left-handed and he still had full use of his left side. And I know there's a lot of people out there that think, the lead side has to pull in order for you to be able to hit good golf shots. And I'm here to tell you that the lead, if it pulls too much, you'll create a roll full of slicers. And, we put both arms on there for a reason. So we were able to actually get him, right away to hit some really good shots. Obviously, he'd been a really good player, a scratch player before. And, we knew the scenario was that it wasn't going to be, probably that coming back into it. The distance was a big factor just because he couldn't swing fast enough because he would lose his balance. But it was quite a fun situation to go through to watch how we use the grip to control the face. Straight shots out there. And, it just goes back to a lot of times, don't lose sight of the basics. Those are the things that are going to get you through. And because we've talked before, I spent a lot of time with John Jacobs, and it doesn't get any more simple than that. And, I named my company Plain Simple Golf just simply because I don't know any other way to think. And so I try to convey that message on to my students too, is I don't want them to think difficult. I want them to think simple. And so, we don't want to get in any difficulties while they're out there.
Well, and there's so many variables. Certainly there's a physical side to the game, but there's a mental side of the game as well. And Robert Moylan, who's going to be joining me later in the show, is going to be talking about the emotional side a little bit more and some of the things that he's doing, which is in his new book. But there's a lot of other factors that are involved that can make or break your golf swing. It's not just all about the physical side. And that's a great example. And, somebody else has been on the program a number of times, Scott Millman, of course, who's also a master teacher professional, works with a lot of veterans who quite often some of them may be missing a limb here and there. And he has to do along the same lines as what you do, Pete, is, he's not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but he might have to make some adjustments. But he basically goes on as normal, as though that they're not, that there isn't a barrier. And, the idea that you're working with somebody who was at one time a scratch golfer, I mean, he may not get back to that level again. Who knows? But at least you're able to take, what his knowledge was. In other words, you're able to tap into what he already knows about the game and what he's capable. So he knows what he's able to do. If he got to a scratch golfer, he knows what to do. Now it's just a matter of making adjustments to his new. It's almost like you've got the right software, but you've got a new computer model that you're using. So now you've got to upload the software into the new model and make a few tweaks and adjustments here to be able to go out and do that. And that's really what you're saying here, is that you have to make a few adjustments to be able to help him to get back and enjoy this game. Great example. I love that. That was a great example. Young Michael, you're on stage, if you will, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to share a scenario as well, if you've got one there.
Yeah, sure. Pete, thanks for taking my stroke student example. Appreciate that.
Sorry.
I'm just kidding. No, I can go over this one. So, I think what I really would like to talk about is something kind of similar to what John and Pete were really talking about, in that there's really no right or wrong. Really, it's just what works for that individual. And I think the biggest thing that I'd like to get across is that I screen all my students first thing. I take a look at them. I've had the opportunity to spend some time with Mike Adams, E.A. Tischler, David Wright, those guys, and and not everybody's built the same, so I want to understand how that individual is built. I go through six basic screens, takes 4 minutes, 3-4 minutes, not even, just to check those things, and it's amazing how just after checking, those things of the body, how fast do the hips move, which way do they want to move, length of the arm, stuff like that, how much you can change and improve a golfer just by setup. As an example, I had I'll give you two quick examples. I have one young kid come to me. I say young, he's probably 21, 22 years old. And he's always been taught, by other instructors, not that they were wrong, but to get the club down, down on the shaft plane, get his right elbow close to the side, stuff like that. So, but he was a big, strong guy, really athletic, but he was only hitting a 7-iron about 145 yards. There's no, weak fade. There's no and he's been playing golf for a long time. He was at one time a scratch golfer, and at the time I think he was like a 10, something like that. So I screened him real quick and looked at it, and a couple of big things stood out to me. One of the quick screens I did after I did the basic screens was I checked I want to see how his arms could rotate. Think of it like rotating his elbow or his forearms outward, to see what kind of flexibility he had, and he could barely rotate his arms out for whatever reason. So him trying to get into that really low position, and the other big red flag was that his forearms were 2.5 inches longer than his upper arm. So when your forearm is that long, the club's going to come down from a steeper place because the club's going to sit higher, at the top of the backswing. So just understanding that, so he was trying to get the club up and then drop it down, but it was causing a lot of really bad misses. So we fixed those things, and he picked up easy 30 yards on his 7-iron. Got to where, looking at him, you'd say, yeah, this kid should probably hit a 7-iron 165, 170 yards. He had a good-looking golf swing. Just he was trying to do something that his body physically could not do. And then another funny one. Hopefully my dad is listening to this. My parents came up last weekend, and I gave them both a lesson. My dad's had 3 back surgeries, I think 3, something like that. He and he has a really bad back. He can't turn. He tries to turn. We'll say unsuccessfully. So I did the screens, and then the other additional screen, I just put a club across his chest and said, all right, don't move your hips. Turn your chest to the right. I want to see how far you can turn without moving your hips. I'm going to be generous and say he turned 5 degrees. So, Dad, I hope you're listening. He just could not turn. So I had him, instead of using rotation more, I had him use his hips more vertically, just, set up with a little more knee flex, turn back, and then allow those legs to straighten as he swung the club down, and basically just swing his arm up, because he could turn back. That wasn't an issue, but turning towards the target, his back would really flare up. So I honestly can say I never would thought I would teach this, but it worked for him because he physically can't do the move that 95% of golfers make of turning to the target. So I was like, just swing it back. As you swing down, go ahead and let the leg straighten. Just get that club to hinge back up to your shoulder. First one he did right was about 130-yard 8-iron right down the middle, and he couldn't even hit his 8-iron 100 yards when he tried to turn. And plus he was hurting his back, and he just kept making it. You saw it on video, and I'm not gonna lie, it looks ugly, but it works.
Now,
and he didn't have back pain, and that's the big. It's would you rather have back pain and do something that your body can physically do, or would you rather look good on camera and make 2 swings and say, nah, I'm good. I'd rather have the functional golf swing that works and matches you and be able to play 18 holes of golf and enjoy it.
Yeah, back exactly. Back situations are very difficult. Let me just throw something in the mix here, Michael, that you might want to have your dad try as well. That might help a little bit. I don't know if you're familiar with the Gary Player, what I used to say is the walk-through swing. If you've ever seen him do that, Pete and John, I'm sure you're probably familiar with this, where he'll actually go in his backswing, and instead of swinging through and stopping in there, what he'll actually do is he'll swing and actually literally walk through, so he's not putting a lot of stress onto his back. You guys, you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Yep. We actually tried it, and he couldn't do it. His back is that bad that he literally cannot turn, around that left leg at all. So it was just one of the things where his hips, basically, to make a swing and actually hit the ball, his hips had to face forward and just work those hips more vertically. Get the, because your hips can work, rotationally, laterally, or vertically, or in most cases a combination of the 3. Problem is with his body, he's got 3 fusions in his back. He can't turn. That takes that one out. He's not going to hit it far, but you know what? The good thing about that vertical motion, think of it like almost like Peter Senior, Stadler uses a lot of verticals, stuff like that. Those guys who have really slow hips, but use their legs straighten pretty severely through the swing. Peter Senior's, he's almost a freak of nature. How much he goes vertically in the swing and stands up through the ball. But he was one of the best ball strikers to play the senior tour.
Very, very good. A good example, Peter Senior. The other thing that I was going to say too is, Pete, going on to the lines of what you were talking about. I actually had a cousin who unfortunately is no longer with us, but years ago was a fairly accomplished. I don't recall offhand what his handicap was, but I think it was probably in around the 5 mark. And he unfortunately succumbed to an injury through work and lost from his elbow down on his right hand. So he still had his left arm intact, but lost his what I would call his trailing hand. And so he lost, of course, a fair bit of distance. But being the consummate golfer and loving the game as much as we do, he didn't give up. And it was at that time when this happened, of course, some of the prosthetics that are available now weren't on the market, so he had to sort of make do with what he had. But I worked with him a little bit and helped him. And what he did, what was very surprising, he was always a pretty decent player all around, but what was surprising was other areas of his game. He was able to certainly not hit it as far as he once did, and or maybe not quite as accurate. But his short game became, almost a thing of legend with the people that he played with. His putting, I mean, he could one putt many greens. I remember we played Glen Abbey, which for years was the home of the Canadian Open, and there's some tough greens. Jack Nicklaus built a great course there in Oakville, Ontario, and he was able to one putt from quite a distance many of those greens. He just had a great touch. So sometimes, Pete, as your gentleman that you used, sometimes there might be some physical challenges and of that nature, but there are ways around it. And as instructors, like you said, what we need to do is we need to really take a look at the whole situation and be able to find creative ways of helping the students overcome some of these challenges. But at the same time, we can't let those challenges distract us from teaching really the basics and the core basics of the game. And so this is why I wanted to talk a little bit tonight with you guys and do something a little bit different and just talk about some things. And John, I want to get you back in here as well.
Sure.
I know you have literally a laundry list of examples, but I think we're all kind of on the same page. I think you've said it as well that sometimes we get caught up in sort of this one methodology, if you will, out there, and we've seen it going down to the shows, and we've seen it in some of the infomercials and things like that. I want you to expand maybe a little bit more in some of the things that you try to do when you're faced with some of the challenges that you get on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. I think you can sum them up in probably 2, maybe 3 buckets. One's trust, trust of yourself, trust of your instructor, trust of what you're doing. The second bucket would be anxiety. We talked a lot about that. And I think the third bucket is feel, because golf, more so than most sports, if you're not feeling the difference between what you're doing versus desiring what you want to do, it's hard to make that change. We're hardwired that way, that we've got to feel those differences. And when it comes down to any type of theory or methodology, one of the things I've always gone to, regardless of skill level, even the absolute basic beginner, is to shut off one of the senses, typically the eyes. Whether it's putting with your eyes closed or hitting pitch and chip shots with your eyes closed, hitting a driver with your eyes closed. I actually did this with a brand new student earlier this week, and he was absolutely astonished where it went, because when you shut off one sense, the other 4 become that much more acute. And it's something that a lot of people can do on their own, regardless of what they're trying to do, but in small chunks. The one thing you don't want to do is make this gargantuan swing with your eyes closed and fall over. We are weebles. We're not supposed to fall down. But I'll give you a classic example. I had a young man back in the mid-'90s who aspired to play collegiate golf. He couldn't hit the broadside of a barn when it came to 4-foot putts. And we tried a lot of different things. He was a big believer in Pels at the time, so we tried that. We tried Paul Runyon. We tried a lot of different methods and or things that he would read about or see. The Golf Channel was burgeoning at the time. It was giving birth to what we see now, and he'd watch it religiously. But yet he still couldn't hit that 4-foot putt. It did boil down to trust. It did boil down to anxiety. But bottom line, he had no clue what he was feeling. So I sat down one day, literally on the putting green behind the hole, and I had an extra ball in my pocket, and put him about 4 or 5 feet away, and asked him, hey, let's just work on this. I'm going to sit here. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to guess where this ball is going. And instead of allowing the ball to go in the hole, I took the other ball out of my pocket, and as the ball approached the hole, no matter how badly it missed, and sometimes it missed pretty bad, I dropped the ball in the hole. Because all of a sudden his hands had to feel what the putter was telling him, but more importantly, his ears had to confirm that he was actually making a stroke that was confident, that was committed, that he could stand over and really do a lot of good things with. He finally caught on, but at the same time he caught on, he bought into it. And it was a drill we always went back to. Well, fast forward his senior year in college, tied for the NCAA championship. And if he makes the putt, they win. And if he misses the putt, they go to a sudden death playoff of some type. And he came to me about a month after this particular putt, and he says, I remembered all those times you sitting behind a hole and dropping a ball in the hole. And literally he went through his practice swings, closed his eyes, executed the putt with his eyes open this time, but he sank the putt, and his team wins the NCAA Division I championship. It's just something that you have to go through and learn, but again, it's trust, it's getting over the anxiety, but then not only trusting and getting over the anxiety, but feeling differences. If he had not felt the difference between a good putt and a bad putt when he was developing, there's no way he would have ever made that putt.
Yeah, and that's a great example. And, that's the thing is I think that sometimes we have to reinforce, what might be sometimes a stressful or anxious situation for people with some positive feedback. And even though, technically he wasn't making those putts, it sort of sent a message to him of reinforcement that it gave him an instant feedback that he was able to then feel with his other senses, as you said, especially his hearing, was able to hear that what he thought that putt was going in. So now his feel would touch in that would sort of take over, and he'd say, okay, I know how hard I hit that, and I sense how I felt making that stroke. And even though some people might look at it and say, well, he might have hit that 10 feet past, it's creating sort of a positive sense or imagery for him and thought process, much like I did in my example, and that's what really I was trying to do. And a lot of times I think we make things too technical. And Pete, back me up on this because I know you believe in a simple approach to this game. I think sometimes we make things too difficult. And that was really the purpose of this exercise tonight, was just to talk about some of the things that we do as instructors to help our students and our thought process and how we can do that. Pete, any thoughts on that?
Well, there's so much information out there today, and I don't think in many cases it's not the information itself that's available, it's how it's interpreted out to the participants. And so, there's the ball flight monitors are great, but you got to get it into the right situation and how you present it. And so you really have to keep it on a more simple basis. I have a high school player who we worked all winter long and came out of the winter as hit swinging as good as anybody I've ever seen swinging. Now, we had to work indoors, but going back to what you're talking about in simplicity, the only thing we really changed is I went to the golf course with him and went around the golf course, and all I did was I'd stand on the tee and say, how far is it to that tree out there on the right-hand side of the fairway? He goes, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you should know. You should know how far that is. And so we just went through, and I basically just brought him along and said, you have to believe you can do this. We're not going to make any changes to what you're hitting. All we're going to do is make you believe you can do it. Because you can play this game, but you got to believe you can. Yeah. And, it went from shooting high 70s to low 80s to back-to-back wins in districts and sectional. So, wow. We really didn't do anything but convince him that he can play. Because he can. The kid can really play, but sometimes it's as simple as that. You say, you know what, you can do this. You just have to be able to do it.
Yeah, and a lot of times the students get in their own way. I think sometimes it's a much simpler solution than what they make it out to be. And I mean, we see this even on the professional level sometimes, that players that will have a great swing and a great game will go through a period where they'll be in a slump, and the next thing you know, they're trying to reinvent that wheel and find out and regain that with physical changes. And some are able to get away with it to a certain degree, but some more often than not don't end up rising to the top again. And sometimes it's just the way that the cards fall. Sometimes there there are other factors involved. And Michael, I'm sure you see this. You're still relatively young out there, and you see a lot of these younger players coming up, and they're wanting to play better. They want to hit the ball a mile still, and when they're not playing at their best golf, suddenly they want to reinvent the wheel, if you will, and that's not necessarily always the best solution. So maybe talk about just for a moment or two here, if you will, Michael, just about some of the situations that you've seen here in the last little while where you've really had to sort of ratchet it back, if you will, and bring them back to reality and say, hey, look, sometimes it's not this over here, it's something much simpler. Can you give us an example of that, where you've had to take those steps?
Yeah, so I work with a couple of mini tour players down in Central Florida, and a lot of those, the mini tour players, most of them have the games to play on the big show, but their mental game is not quite where it needs to be, just like what the guys were talking about. And one of my favorite books, it's not even a golf book, but one of my favorite books that I try to get all my serious players to read is a book called The Secret. And I don't know if you guys know about The Secret, but it's about basically the law of attraction. What you think about is what you're going to bring about. I mean, how many times are you standing on a hole, say, water lining the right-hand side of the hole, and you're thinking, I don't want to go in the water. I don't want to go in the water. Well, where's that ball probably going to go? It's going to go in the water.
It's going in the water.
Your mind doesn't hear. You don't want to go there. It just hears, hey, water. So just getting them to understand that. I mean, I have all the tools. I got K-Vest. I have Flight Scope. I have Body Track, JC Video. I have all that stuff. But if you, and like the guy said, if you don't know how to interpret it, it's basically $20,000 worth of junk. So you need to know how to take that material and translate it to someone who knows nothing about the golf swing. Whether that's creating a feel, whether that's showing them, depending on how they learn. Whether it's, do you have to put them there? Can they just hear it and say, okay, I got it, or do they need to see it? So it depends on how that person learns of how you're going to use that technology. So I mean, it's just you got to really. I can't tell you how many times we're using it, and they just start. You could actually see them think. And guys, I know you know what I'm talking about. You can actually watch the wheels turning, and just step back, say, "Hey, look at me. Hey, woo, take a look, take a breath, calm down, just hit the back of the ball." That's simple, And one of my favorite sayings to my mini tour players, one of my good friends, JP. Down in Orlando, is a great player, and he'll shoot 65, 64 in practice every time, and then he'll go out and shoot 72 in the tournament. And I think for him, it's more of a mental belief in yourself. He believes he can do it, but then when he gets under the competitive pressure, and one of my favorite sayings is, whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. So why not believe you can? Right, so what do you got to lose? And we've all fallen under that problem. But you got a choice. You can either think positive or negative. And we've all thought negatively for a while, and it's not exactly a fun place to live. So do the same thing, just like you would in your life. You want to be driving down the road and saying, "Man, I suck at driving. This is awful. Like I really should stop." But you go on the golf course and you have one bad round, and you think, "Oh my God, I need to change everything." When in reality, that's just golf. You're going to have bad rounds. It happens.
I just want to mention something real quickly about the different equipment and technology out there, Michael, just so that people understand. We certainly, and I certainly don't want to say that there isn't a place for this technology, because there certainly is. Some of the technology is really there designed not so much for the student as it is for the instructor. It's there as a tool for the instructor to be able to gather information, to be able to assess a player's ability or faults or areas that they need improvement on. And there's certainly some equipment there that will be there to harness and help that student feel certain things. But like you said, Michael, one of the things that I think that we have to remember as instructors is there's a proper time and place for that equipment. Certainly there's a lot of equipment like Flight Scope and some of these other simulators and things out there that will give, again, data in that. But that information is really for us, the instructors, to be able to use and interpret and then formulate a game plan, if you will, from that information. So it's kind of like a doctor that takes an X-ray, looks at certain points in the X-ray and decides, okay, here's what the problem is, and then puts together a solution, if you will, on how to treat that particular diagnosis. What often happens, I think, in this industry and in other industries is a lot of times that people get too caught up in the equipment and tend to sort of put it in the forefront, and we lose our objectivity, I think, sometimes with that. So you're exactly right. I think there's a time and a place for it. I think that it can certainly help, but I think we have to be careful sometimes, too, that we don't but, yeah, all the equipment that you just mentioned there, Michael, is certainly fantastic stuff. I think all of us are familiar with most of it, and it certainly has helped the game quite a bit. But it's just knowing when to dial it back at certain times throughout our daily teaching, if you will, is knowing when's the proper time to use it and that. Guys, I want to thank you. It's hard to believe that hour just blew right by. I wanted to do this, as I said, this sort of it's a very simple exercise, but I wanted to do this a little bit differently, just to give us a chance to really talk about some of the things that we do and share some of our thoughts. And I'm going to give you guys each a few moments, if you will. Pete, I'll start with you this time, just to let everybody know where they can get a hold of you, and if there's any closing thoughts or comments that you want to make.
Well, as I've always said, we're Plain Simple Golf, and we always want to try to keep it simple. And you can get a hold of us at plainsimplegolf.com. The plain is PLANE. All the contact information is out there, and the information on the simple swing repeater that we use. But I'll just give you one last little thing. One of the players that I had always had trouble on number 10 because the fairway was so narrow. So I said, well, why don't you drive it over there in the one fairway? That's pretty wide, and it's still an easy shot over to the green. And so that's what he did in the tournament. He drove it over into one, knocked it over there, and made birdie on the hole. So it's sometimes there's a real simple solution. You just gotta take your options and try it. So, but and again, go ahead.
No, please finish your thought.
No, I was just going to say again, it all just for me it all boils back to just the sheer simplicity of it.
Yeah, and it goes back to what I said earlier about making the student really use their own thought process and their own imagination. I mean, it's very easy for us to tell a student what they should or shouldn't do, but ultimately it's up to them to sort of search through their own feelings and emotions, if you will, and come up with a game plan. We can certainly give them the tools, and that's really what we're doing as instructors. We're giving them the tools to put in their tool chest, if you will, to take with them on a job. And their job is to navigate around the golf course. It's not to tell them. We can certainly give them some examples and give them scenarios, but it's not our job. It's up to them and with the information that we've given them. Michael, you want to any closing thoughts and just let the folks know how they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so just to go off of what Pete said, if you watched the PGA Tour a couple weeks ago, Ben Crane actually drove it the next fairway over and had to ask to play through that group because there was such a severe dogleg. Shortest distance between A and B is a straight line, right? So, Pete, hit the nail on the head there. Just a tour example of somebody doing the exact same thing. So, But yeah, so if anybody wanted to get a hold of me, you can go to my website, michaelwheelergolf.com. All my contact information is there. My cell phone number is there. My email address. Like Ted said, I'm at Bellwood Golf Country Club, which is just outside Philadelphia, in the summer, and I will be down at Ocala National in the winter, starting in November. So, John, hopefully I'll see you down there at some point. But yeah, so if anybody wants to get a hold of me, just feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever works.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Michael. And last but certainly not least, John, my good friend John, any closing thoughts, and just let the folks know how they can get a hold of you.
Sure, real quickly, Pete. Mike, thanks for spending the time with us tonight. It was my honor and pleasure. Michael will definitely take you up on that invite when you're back down. Let me know when you're coming, and we'll get something arranged. I think I can sort of sum up what we've all been talking about tonight by saying that if we all stay within ourselves, not only as coaches but as golfers, we'll get a whole lot more accomplished because it is that much more simple. One of the phrases I use quite often with people is, I don't have Cheech and Chong's magic dust that made the reindeer fly, but you certainly have it within your own pocket. And whether I'm instructing you or Peter or Michael is or Ted or anybody's instructing you, our job is to help you reach into that pocket, grab as much magic dust as you can, and have you understand how to efficiently use it so you never have to regenerate new magic dust. Just keep building on the dust that you have in that pocket. And I think if you stay within yourself, have some trust, don't worry about the things you can't control, and make things simple as we've been talking about. The magic dust is pretty easy to find, and it's not as deep in the pocket as you thought.
Right.
And this was a great discussion, Ted, and a great idea. Appreciate and honored again to be on the program. People can reach me at johnhughesgolf.com. Again, like Michael, all my information's there. And I want to plug something. I'm going to start some really neat research projects with some of my partners, FlightScope being one, Cobra Golf, as well as Golf Pride, and be looking for that announcement both in social media, on my website, and if you can make it out to one of the venues where we're doing some of these projects, love to meet you and love to shake your hand and share some more wisdom with you.
That sounds good. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Pete Buchanan, Michael Wheeler, and, of course, John Hughes, some great professionals in the industry, some great coaches and teachers. And thank you guys, as always. Interesting discussion. Always want to try and keep things a little bit different here so that it's not getting too routine. And I think this was something that I wanted to kind of go in a different direction for this evening, and we'll have something different the next time. But thank you guys for pitching in, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. And I look forward to having you guys back on another panel.
Thanks, Ted. Great.
All right. Have a great evening, guys.
Take care.
You too.
All right. Okay, that was my Coach's Corner panel tonight here. We had some great discussion, just talked a little bit about some scenarios that they've had, and talked about one of the scenarios that I had a few years ago when I was back up in Canada. But tonight, I also want to talk to a gentleman who's been interested in coming on the program. He's a licensed clinical professional counselor. His name is Robert Moylan, and he's the author of, I think this is book number 3, if I read things correctly, called Mastering the Psychology of Golf with Emotional Core Therapy. And I'm going to bring him on here. He's been patiently waiting here. Ran a little bit later with the other segment of the program, but I'm going to bring him out here in just a second. But let me just read a little bit about Robert's background, and then we'll bring him on the show. As I mentioned, he's a licensed clinical professional counselor, or LCPC, which I'm going to use because I can't say the other too many more times. It'll tie up my tongue. But through his 20 years of psychology research, he has discovered the simplest and most effective behavioral psychology approach currently available in the world to treat most relationship, psychological stress, including eating disorders, everything from addictions, depression, anxiety, trauma, anger, even marital discord, and, of course, sports psychology, and even some personality disorders. His book for adults was The Emotional Core Therapy, was a top-rated book on Amazon.com in 2014 in 2 different categories, mental health and emotions. And his book for teens, which was called Emotional Core Therapy for Adolescents, was ranked number 7 in the same category. And his third book, which we're going to talk about tonight, which I mentioned, is Mastering the Psychology of Golf with Emotional Core Therapy, was just published this year and is already a breakthrough in the world of golf psychology. And we're going to talk about that at some length tonight. But let me bring Robert on and have some discussion. Good evening, Robert.
Hi, Ted.
Welcome to Golf
Good to
Talk.
hear from you. Thanks for the
How
introduction.
are you doing? Not a problem. I hope I got everything correct. And I'm going to refer to it as LCPC because I don't know if I can do it, as I said, too many times. That's a long title.
That's fine. That's a professional title for an independent therapist out here in Illinois. They have different labels for people throughout the country, whether it's psychologist, social worker, counselor. The key is, can you meet the needs of your clients? And sometimes you can do that even without a license. If you're pretty down to earth, you persevere, and you know some basic emotional coping skills. So
right.
It doesn't matter what you call me. It's a matter of, can I serve you guys well on the radio here today and in my daily life, both on and off the golf course. And that's what my goals are today.
Well said. And let me just first say I read the book and actually just finished it just a couple of weeks ago. And very, very well written book. And we're going to talk a little bit about what I want to do tonight, Robert, is this, though. I don't want to get too much detail out of the book. We're going to talk certainly about emotional core therapy, but I want to leave some of the nuggets, if you will, that back in the book so that people will go out and get a copy and read it for themselves. But we're going to talk a little bit about some of the theory behind it and so forth, just to help people understand how you approach this. But let's talk about, first off, obviously emotions or feelings affect us all. And in your book you explain how despite there being at least 100 feelings or emotions, you've broken them down really into 4 categories: joy, fear, grief, and relief. Can you explain a little bit about that for the audience?
Sure. That's what really happens to people is they get overwhelmed by the different names for emotions, but there's really only 4. When you go towards something you like, there's joy. And when you leave something you like, there's grief. For example, an ice cream cone. You like ice cream, and go have an ice cream, you feel good about it. It's joyful. Which is, other names for that would be happy, ecstatic, things like that.
Sure.
When you leave a joyful relationship, there's grief, which is sadness or depression, otherwise known as that. When you go to something you don't like, there's fear, which is otherwise known as anxiety and dread. And when you leave that, there's relief. The key thing for all golfers to understand is really these emotions are with us shot by shot, hole by hole. And really on the course and off the course, they're with us hourly and daily. But these are temporary states of being. Really a predominant state of being with someone who has learned my approach is one of a relaxed, what we call like mindfulness state of being, relaxed, daydream, reflective, sort of quieter state of being. So when you have that as your common personality type, then you can easily identify those 4 feelings when they come and release them. The trick for any athlete, and I deal with all kinds of athletes, not just golfers, but
right.
The key for golfers is to not get stuck in your emotions, to release your emotions shot by shot, so you feel energetic and optimistic about the next shot you have. That only can come effectively from identifying these emotions. What I see is that many golfers really learn inappropriate coping mechanisms to deal with their emotions. And I'll step aside for a second because I deal with people, maybe 30 cases a week of different clients off the course, but they learn inappropriate or inaccurate or only partially successful approaches off the course too. Traditionally, what people have learned, and my own self included, is techniques like RE, rational emotive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, acceptance commitment therapy, even the 12 steps, things like that. What happens is they learn these techniques, but they all redirect you from your true emotional state. My approach doesn't do that. My approach has you learn from your emotions, which is much more empowering in the long run. And I'll give you one example so you see this real quick. Let's take a scratch golfer. This guy can shoot 70, 71, 72, 69 any day of the week. He's got a perfect iron game, driver, perfect putting, chipping. One part of his game is his bunker game is a little bit off. He's probably like a 7-8 handicap on that part of his game.
Right.
So when he gets into the bunkers, he might take a bogey or double bogey pretty easily on that part of his game. My approach, once he learns my approach for that bunker shot and really is honest with his emotions and learns from them rather than runs away from them, he can really take that for the rest part of his game, but also in every part of his life on the course, at work, at home with his wife, kids, you name it, backaches, everything else. My step-by-step process can pretty much handle any relationship stress. It's an 8-step process. And what happens is you learn to continually monitor your emotions, identify them, and release them, so you become aware from it. It's very empowering to do that. I think the key, what I see with golfers, is that they really have trouble with the grief and fear, like we all do. We hit bad shots, we get stuck in bad situations, like this scratch golfer who has a bad sandbugger game. But the trick is to not get angry at yourself. Anger is just grief. The trick is to learn from your emotions right there, to try different things. When something's not working for you, Ted, if it's not working 3 or 4 times and you're hitting a bad shot, what do you got to do? You got to try something different. So it's trial and error. And I really do mention this in my book a couple of times, but that there's no golf coach out there, you name Hank Haney, you name Butch Harmon, et cetera, that can teach any golfer out there a perfect swing on the first try. It's always trial and error. Why? Because what happens is when you correct one part of the swing, other parts of the swing are affected. And the good example I use is a mobile in a house. When you walk into it, you hear a chime. You hit one part of the chime, it affects the other part of the chimes, and it all chimes together. Well, that's how it is with a swing. If you tell somebody, change your wrist, change your feet, change your hips, I would say, things like this, change the way your head's tilted, etc., it's going to affect the other parts of your swing. That's why nobody can come out and fix a swing on the first time of every golfer. It's trial and error. When it's trial and error, Ted, that's where we have to learn from our emotions and be supportive. So I'm really supportive and compassionate of people. I don't use anger or fear for any golfer or any athlete or any person in my life. I use compassion because I've been through this myself. I was a number 1 boxer, wrestler growing up in Illinois. I wrestled Big Ten, but I've had many, many pains. Actually, I remember more of the losses than wins because the losses hurt so much as a boxer and wrestler. I was getting up pretty good, And I had to, it's funny because I love golf. I play all the time, but I'll tell you, golf is much easier on the soul for me than boxing and wrestling. There was no place to turn when I was getting beat up in the boxing ring, and when I was wrestling the same way, I'd crawl off the mat sometimes. And so I had a bunch of surgeries too when I was younger. What happens is you learn from those bad emotions. You learn what you can and can't handle, and that's the whole trick. Is I would tell all your people on your radio show right now, and that golf's a gift. It's a gift to be out in nature and play golf, and it's a gift to be a human being and live a good life. But it really comes from learning about those emotions, learning about what the demands are in a golf course, the needs of a golf course, which I talk about extensively in my book, and learning to really embrace those challenges and learn from them rather than run away from them. The one more thing I'll say real quick, too, is that all other approaches besides my approach, they redirect you from your true emotional state, your true central nervous system. And what happens is, I'll give you one example real quick so we see this. A couple years ago, Ernie Els was playing in the British Open. Beautiful drive down the middle, but he landed in a bunker on his last hole, one of his last holes. Had to hit a tough downhill lie shot, made it right to the hole, and pitched in for par. But what does it take for somebody like Ernie Els to do that? You look at Ricky Fowler, who's up there. Anybody's really powerful as far as their drive. They have to use all their power in their drive, but a sand shot is a very finesse shot. What does it take to be able to do that? What does it take to be an effective golfer? Understanding and control over your central nervous system. So really the central nervous system, how is it affected? It's affected by those 4 true emotions, joy, grief, fear, and relief. They alter the central nervous system. So good golfers, the really best golfers on tour, most of them have a good understanding of their central nervous system, but some don't, some do. That's the key of my approach, is to learn how to manage your central nervous system, not let it get away from you, not let it hurt you.
Well, and that's a great point. And, just to mention another golfer who really a lot of people would not think that what I would classify as the finesse part of his game would be that good was John Daly. I mean, John Daly would, as we all know, would grip it and rip it and hit it a mile. But he was an incredible short game player. I mean, he would. I remember watching him, and I was talking about earlier being up back home up in Canada at the Canadian Open at Glen Abbey, and on the driving range there was a section where they had, of course, the practice green, and the way the range was divvied up is there was some teeing areas on the left-hand side of the screen, and there was some on the right-hand side. And on the right-hand side, but to the left, which was sort of cozy right up near the green, it was slightly uphill on not a platform, but a raised tee box, if you will. And John Daly would stand there on that left edge of the teeing area, and he would take his probably his 60-degree lob wedge, and he would literally bring that club all the way, as we all know, would wrap around him 2 or 3 times, it looked like, and he would come through like a full swing, and he would just finesse that ball a couple of feet in the air, and it would trickle onto that green, which was only probably 7 or 8 feet from where he was standing. But he would do it with such sensitivity. Now, here's a guy that would grab his driver and just literally murder the ball down the middle of the fairway, 300 plus yards. But at the same time, he'd turn around and be able to finesse his lob wedge a couple of feet away from him with such sort of gingerness, if you will, that it was just truly amazing. I want to bring up a quick point on something that you said and see if I'm understanding correctly what the point you were making. You talked about the scratch golfer. I think a lot of people using these sort of 4 categories that you've broken down to, this golfer, of course, would obviously have, if his bunker play was not very solid compared to the rest of his game, would certainly have a fear every time he was faced going into that bunker, and was probably relieved if he was able to get out of the bunker. Would that be a pretty accurate assessment of what you're talking about?
I would say so, but also when he misses those shots, there's grief there. So what happens is, he might be, you see these guys play like in these, PGA events. Most of them are just excellent golfers in almost all aspects of their play, but, he's feeling really good, hitting good drives, iron shots, etc., pitches, chips, and he comes to that bunker and he misses. There's these feelings of grief and fear. They can be, for some people, overwhelming. The trick, Ted, is to learn to release those emotions before your next shot. Each shot you hit, you have to learn. It's like brushing your teeth. Stress comes every shot. You have to release it every day. Shot. You have to clean your soul out. I call it catharsis. Catharsis is king. And I teach in my book how to release it, different ways to release it, whether it's deep breathing, joking with your caddy, looking at the sky, making noises. I always make noises on the course. I go, just clean out my soul a little bit. But there's different ways to release emotions on the course. On the course, golfers are really kind of, how should I say it? They're kind of they're limited in what they can do versus off the course. Off the course, you can do different things. You can use headphones, music. You can do art therapy, role playing, psychodrama, different techniques that we use to help people with longer term stress. On the course, you really can't do that, so they are limited a little bit.
Sure.
And so it's kind of a challenge to teach people how to handle their emotions on the course. And I'll say this real quick, Ted. You can't just learn golf psychology for on the course. Why? Because it's a use it or lose it project. In other words, off the course, the emotions are still with you. So if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So what happens is good people, my clients, I try to do this, and I really try to spread the word on my approach, is that you use the ECT approach on the course and off the course. You own your emotions, and that gets you the most out of life, off the course too. So you do good in golf, you make a couple $1 million you're doing on tour, etc. Why not have a good life off the course? Why not optimize your relationships, all your relationships with your family and friends, etc.? Well, the way to do it is to learn to bring joy to people's lives off the course, And so the other thing I'll say too about the 4 true emotions, learn from your emotions. Those shots that are hitting you, are you doing well? You're hitting good shots. Those are bringing you joy. The shots that bring you grief and fear, what do? You change your relationship with those things. You don't do the same thing over and over again. You learn to try something different, and that's kind of the approach I have. If something's not working, we got to try something else. Don't just sit there doing the same thing over and over again, because that's where anger comes in. Anger, which a lot of people don't understand, is really just grief. It's very difficult to learn from anger. Because you're reacting to grief. The trick is, once you feel that anger, like say this golfer who's got the scratch golfer who's hitting poor shots out of the bunker. If he gets angry, that's the time to get in touch with the grief. And when you feel that grief, you got to try something different. Maybe try to open your stance a little bit. Maybe try to change your grip. Do whatever. By the way, the golf teaching pros do. I don't teach golf technique. I teach the mental approach. The golf technique, what you'll see is that with all the good coaches, it's compassionate, empathetic approach. It's trial and error because they've been through it themselves. You just don't get to fix it on the first try. It's 3, 4, 5, 6 different things we're trying to get it. That's why you want to work with somebody that's been there before. I tell all young golfers, try to go with somebody that's shooting under par. Why? Because they usually had made so many mistakes. They can teach you the right things a little bit quicker.
Right. Well, and that's what when I was a youngster growing up, before I got into the teaching side of things, I always, when I would go, I used to love going to the golf course a lot of times by myself. And get placed in with some better players as I was, younger learning the game. And the reason I did that was for the very reason you just stated, was I didn't want to, I wanted to learn from people that were very accomplished golfers and that were able to get over some of the hurdles that I wanted to get over, and that was really how I learned. Something too that I talked about a little earlier on the show, and I don't know how much you were able to hear. I had what we called a Coach's Corner panel a little earlier on with some of the other teacher professionals in the industry that I have every week come on. I have a different panel every week, but one of the exercises that we want to do tonight is I wanted to talk about some of the different scenarios that we get faced with. And one of the scenarios that I had was a CEO back home that was really struggling. And one of the things that they struggled with was anxiety and stress. So I created a scenario that actually put him in a stressful situation, because I knew as a CEO that he would be able to use the skills that he learned in his business out in the golf course to be able to handle that. So I didn't certainly create anything that was unrealistic. I just simply put a small gallery of coworkers around him, basically, is what I did. But the other thing that I did, he was struggling with consistency. And it goes to the point that you just talked about making changes. He was doing the same things all the time, getting the same results. So what I did is I created a scenario where I gave him one thing to focus on that was entirely different than what he had done before to help improve his consistency. And at the end of the exercise, he was able to realize a much different approach to how he did things. And the example that I used with the stress and to the anxiety, by having some of his peers around him representing a gallery, if you will, it caused him to be able to block out those distractions, much like if a tour pro was going up on the first tee and there's 1,000 people standing around. They have to be able to block those out and rely on their own senses and their own emotions and gather, much like Ernie had to do when he hit that great drive. And when he went into the bunker, he would have to tap into those emotions. And this is an area that I think golf is starting to open up to through books like this and through others in the industry that are starting to realize it's not all about the golf swing. It's about what goes on inside the player. And the more that we as instructors, and that's why I found not just the title, but I found the actual core of the book very, very interesting, because it really talks about a lot of things that I believe in, that I think we as humans, it's not just about golf, it's about life in general. And we navigate through life in different ways. And a lot of times we take the hard road many times because we allow our emotions from outside to creep in at work, to creep in at the golf course, whether it be relationships. And this is why I think that as instructors, we're certainly not going to learn it overnight, but I think the more that we understand about how emotions play and how it affects our everyday life, it's going to help us be able to help our students play better golf and enjoy it. The main thing is we want them to have fun and enjoy it. And right now, to be honest, in the golf industry, there's a lot of people out there that are not enjoying or having fun playing golf because of that.
Right, exactly. And I would say go back to that situation. Fear, just so you know, Ted, is with us hourly, daily, our whole life.
Sure.
It's with us on the course and off the course. The trick is to learn from it, to not let it affect you. And one more thing, too. My approach is pretty simply easily understood. I do this all day long for people, golfers, any type of folks, but usually it takes 5 or 6 hours to read through it, practice the exercises. I have a video out there too on YouTube, emotional core therapy video, which goes through some golf shots, but other scenarios too in life. All told, if you're really hard-sent in really learning something, it'll probably take 8-10 hours to really master the approach, and then you practice on the course. But it's a process that you can use for any type of stressful event on the course. By the way, let's go back to other things too, like injuries. A lot of good golfers, they get a little tweak here in their shoulders, their hips. They're off a little bit. I see golfers coming to top 10 on the PGA Tour one week, and guess what? Next week they missed a cut. They're in dead last place or 10th, and it's hard for these guys. They're away from their home, they're at home with their families. But really, it's not really just focused on golfers, because the average amateur golfer he goes to work 9 to 5, comes off work, hits for a couple hours, maybe plays on the weekends. He still can feel, Ted, he can still feel awful when he comes up the course. Why? Because he cares about the shots. For anybody that really cares about their golf game, they really, what the trick is, Ted? Do you have pain about the way you're playing? Are you not happy? If you're not happy, well then, guess what? This book can help you. If you're really happy with how you're doing on the course and off the course, you're really not going to take the time to learn something different. But for those golfers that are not happy how they're doing, we now have a process that works pretty much every time. It's I've been doing this for years and years, perfected it. It works every time. It's a process you can use for any type of stressful event on the course and off the course. Let's say a couple things too real quick. Let's take wind conditions, cold weather, warm weather, hot weather, rain, sun, expensive play, new clubs, cheer, crowds cheering for you, your best friend, your girlfriend, your boyfriend are watching you play, competition. These are all factors that come into play and affect a golf game. Well, now we have a process that can work each time to help you with that stress on the course and off the course. The trick is once you learn my process, you embrace it for what you're hurting about. Then you can transfer it to other aspects of your life, homework, family, etc.
Right, exactly. I noticed through the book, too, that you have an 8-step flow chart for emotional core therapy. I want to just sort of brush along, obviously we have limited time, but I want to brush along the different categories, and I just want you to maybe comment and talk about and put it into relationship, if you will, with your program. So obviously the first one being relationships. How is that affecting our relationships? Explain a little bit about that, how that affects our golf game.
Right. I just do this automatically myself, but I have the book right in front of me, and with my clients, I'm doing this over and over again, day by day, week by week. What happens is relationships either come together or grow apart. That's what causes us stress. So we're always moving into relationships and leaving them. That's the whole thing. Now, when I talk about relationships, it's really with self, other people, places, or things. With the golf course, it's typically what causes them stress is the golf club in your hand. You know what I mean? For the most part, with golfers, it's not so much the crowd, everything else. It's their relationship with the golf club at hand, the various shots you need to hit. To be a good golfer, what do you need? You need a driver, long iron, short iron, pitching, chipping, sand shots, putting. These are all shots you got to have, if you want to be an effective golfer. If you have 4 or 5 of them, you don't have a couple, you're going to probably have some tough shots on the course that are going to cause you some pain. But the trick is, it's really not just the things. It's the people around you. Other type of things can cause you stress. Everybody's different in what causes them stress, but the trick is we have a process that works. So again, the first step is relationships either come together, move apart, and cause us stress. So we understand that. I'll go through the step by step if you want. The next part is the needs. It's the needs of a relationship that causes stress, and I break these down into emotional, financial, spiritual, physical. With golf, again, it's really the physical demands, the physical relationship you have with the golf club. Say you're a basketball player, it's the basketball. Tennis player, it's a tennis racket for the most part. But there's other things that come into effect, the weather, etc. So we break these down into the needs into emotional, financial, spiritual, physical. That's what causes stress. Let's take a golfer that is has a great game, but he goes home and his wife's psycho, so she causes him stress all the time. Well, really, and I could switch around men, women. I do this all the time. So it could be a woman golfer and the guy's psycho at home. But the trick is, the needs, emotional, financial, spiritual, physical, a loving partner has all those needs, emotional, financial, spiritual, physical. Sometimes the emotional demands of a partner can be excessive. Sometimes the financial demands of a partner. On the course, you could have these too. You could have the financial demands of playing golf could be expensive. Say if you're a player. I was working with a player last year that was traveling around tour on different tours too. It's expensive to go out there in hotels, just to cut, etc. So it's financial stress can come into play. Hey, when I hit that ball in the water, I see $1.25 go down the drain myself. I make a little noise, like cry a little bit, But there's financial stresses on the course. But the trick again is every relationship has needs, and the needs are what causes stress. So we have to learn to identify those needs and deal with them. Once we do that, we're a better person. And the next step is really your 5 senses: seeing, touching, tasting, hearing. They're how we intake those needs that cause us stress. Most of the time on a golf course, we're seeing and touching the golf club, maybe a little bit here, feeling the wind or whatever. The real key thing is our senses are what cause those emotions. And invariably, again and again, the trick is to learn to identify your emotions and release them each shot. Do not get stuck in your emotions. I'll give you an example of Rory McIlroy a couple of years ago at the Masters. He was, he was doing really well. I think he was winning the tournament for a little while, but got stuck in a couple of bad shots. He couldn't let it go. He carried that stress with him hole by hole. Going back to John Daly, he was drinking for a long time. It affected his game. Drinking alcohol numbs the senses, numbs the emotions. You can't be an effective golfer if you're doing that from time to time. The trick is again to identify those emotions, deal with them shot by shot. So the next step, the 5th step, is your emotions, go to your central nervous system, your brain. That's an automatic step for all of us. It really happens automatically, but I put it in there to see what the process, how it goes. the trick for golfers and for everybody, human beings in general, is that you have uncomfortable symptoms. That's the sixth step. Your muscle tension, tightness in your body. It could be anything. If you have fear, it could be your central nervous system's elevated a little bit, sort of like with anger. You have to, you have shoulder tension. It could be anything. Head, quick speech, etc. Could be back tension in your lower back, etc. It could be anywhere. People vary from vary. Grief and sadness are a little bit different because your central nervous system's getting depressed a little bit. So it could be like a sinking feeling in there. It could be a real take a knife in the heart feeling that you get. It's really, as far as sadness goes, that can be a different feeling you have as far as the symptom goes. The trick is you're going to have these from time to time, but you've got to release them. Now in my book, I talk about 20, 25 different ways to release your emotions, on the course and off the course. But you have to be able to do that hourly and daily, on the course, on the course shot by shot, but off the course you have to learn to do that too. The better people do it, release your emotions each day, go to bed, comfortable. That's a good process. What happens, Ted, just so you know, is what really happens to people is they get in long-term stressful situations, both on the course and off the course, mostly off the course that affect them. And we have to work through that, whether it's legal trouble, loved ones getting sick, family members getting sick, divorce, financial loss, etc. And they affect people from time to time, but you have to learn to identify that and release it. Sometimes your answer is not going to happen in a day, Ted. I just recently had a woman who lost her husband after 25 years. She was clinically depressed for a while. That takes time. It might take a couple of years to get over completely. It might take 6 months or longer, but you've got to be able to work through those things. You have to. That's what winning people do on the course and off the course, and it's a part of life, And the last step of the process, the eighth step, is to have a meditative, reflective, daydreaming lifestyle. It's sort of like mindfulness, but what I just teach you to do is let your mind wander and daydream. Now, one of the best ways to do that is sitting in a jacuzzi, letting your listen to soft music, spa music, so to speak. But we can't always do that. It's not practical. Right. So how else can you do it? You can do that gardening, walking a dog, driving a car, listening to a radio. Whatever way you can learn to let your mind wander and daydream, that's integral. That's really key to my approach to have that relaxed lifestyle. I call it acting like a little 2-year-old. A little 2-year-old doesn't do a lot of thinking. They're in a playful state of being. When you can get to that relaxed, playful state of being, guess what? Then you're ready to identify those 4 feelings and release them, And
exactly.
That's a great way to play golf and a great way to live.
Well, and I think one of the things, Robert, that we all have to understand, and as you pointed out, we all have issues and things that we may deal with from time to time, whether it be a divorce, whether it be financial issues. And, some listeners might be thinking, well, what does that have to do with my golf game? And, I want to learn how to play better golf. But we have to understand that it all works together. It all connects together because much like your job, let's take your job, for instance. If you have an already stressful job and now you heap on, maybe you had a fight with your spouse this morning, or maybe the bills are mounting up and you're having to work overtime, suddenly now it's not just the job that's stressful, it's all of the outside elements, a disagreement with a spouse, financial issues that now you're bringing to work every day. So you're not giving your best. So it only furthers the point that it's going to happen on the golf course. Some people may say, well, I'm going to go to the golf course to escape that. But the reality is, more often than not, we don't escape it because we bring all of that baggage with us to the golf course. And now we're thinking about, well, geez, I left an hour early from work. I hope the boss doesn't mind, out in the golf course. Or I'm going to be a little bit late getting off the golf course. I hope my wife doesn't. So already the wheels are in motion. Instead of focusing on that good golf shot, you're now focusing on whether the boss is going to be upset or whether your wife is going to be angry or your spouse is going to be angry coming home a little bit late from the golf course. So, there's all of these things that play in, and you're right. And what people don't understand is, and this is what I want to ask you, is how can people use, and I'll use the short version, ECT, some of the golfers out there to spend less time trying to fix their swings and more time handling their emotions. What are some, I know you can't go through everything, but just maybe give some examples of how people can use some of these techniques and some of this information to help them play a little bit better.
Good point, Ted. I'll say quickly, again, one of the best things to do is watch my video first and then read my book. This is what I actually train people now. I got approval to train people throughout the country. I have online courses on my course, and in Illinois I do live presentations now each month. but I also have you can take my course online or in person, home study. So they get CEUs. It's accredited by a bunch of states to do this. Even the National Association of Addiction Professionals, which is the biggest organization in the country, has approved it for a 6-hour CEU class. So in Illinois, just so you know, I'm approved for 20 professions to take my class online, home study, in person, or group presentations. So it really effectively works. The thing I would tell you this is to, again, watch the video, read the book. And so when you do that, we're all at different stages, Ted, of a process.
Sure.
Some people need to learn how to relax a little bit better. Some people need to learn, that's the 8th step. Some people need to learn to release emotions a little bit better. That's the 7th step. Some people might need to learn to identify their bodily stress, which is the 6th step. It's all a process, and it all, honestly, it could take, a couple of months for a good golfer. Even when I see the guys on tour and even the announcers, I know they don't know exactly what they're speaking of as far as emotions. They have a good idea, but not a great idea. So even the guys on tour are going through this, and they're the best golfers in the world. The trick is to be kind and supportive while you're working on different stages, but to be honest with what you need to work on. Going back a second ago, what you talk about chronic stress, I see that very often in my clients.
Yeah.
I would say 25% of my clients are carrying chronic stress with them off the course and on the course, and their games are affected by it. And that's a sad thing. It's just they'd be much better off if they can learn to, like a lot of women do, learn to identify their emotions real quick and effectively deal with your emotions. I think a lot of guys have a little more trouble with it right away, but we're all human beings, so we all suffer. We all are incomplete human beings. We all have stress, and the trick is to really learn from it when it comes and own up to it. Once you do that, you live a much more relaxed lifestyle. Your blood pressure will go down. You'll have fun on the course and off the course. It's a process, Ted. We all come at different stages. You, everybody else. My own personal game is suffering right now. I'm working at it. Just one by one, chipping away. I'm nice to myself. It doesn't do any good to be yell at yourself or be angry. That's just grief. So what it does is you learn from the grief. If I'm not hitting a good shot, I'm going to try something different after a while. If I hit 3 or 4 bad shots, it's time to try something different. And that's where we get. One more thing I'll say this too. You don't see anybody leaving the golf course going to the emergency room, with their anger or their stress. They hook a ball into the water. It's not going to happen. But I really do deal with life and death situations all the time.
Sure.
And by my process, people get stuck in these emotions for hours, days, weeks, months, and we have a process now that you can use for almost any type of stress on the course and off the course. The exceptions are where if you have sensory impairments, real cognitive delays, or long-term physical, psychological damage. There's limitations of what psychology can do. But for the vast majority of us, you can really get the most out of your game, by using this process. I always tell people, again, it's like brushing your teeth. You brush your teeth and you clean your teeth every day. Why? You don't want cavities. Well, it's the same thing with emotions. You don't want to get stuck in bad emotions, so identify them and release them, and you stay positive. I love golf and I love life, and how do I get the most out of it? To learn from each part of the game and to help other people. For me, it's a service to help other people. I enjoy the connection of golfers, and I enjoy the connection of people off the course. It's really a privilege to serve these people. It's like serving you on the phone here today and hopefully helping your viewers. If anybody has calls, they can certainly call me, and I'm glad to service them in any way. Many of the times with golfers, I do this stuff, pro bono. I'm always helping people on the course, helping them in any way I can, because I enjoy the connection. It's a good group of people out there.
Well, and you raise an interesting point too, and something that I've when I was reading the book and on the back cover here, and I just want to read this out real quick and just for the listeners' benefit here. You talk about wanting to live a full life without regrets, and so many people, and I know you see it every day in what you're doing, but so many people look back and say, boy, I wish, if I had done that, I could have been here, or if I had done this, I might have been able, and it happens out in the golf course. Boy, if I had instead of trying to go for the green, maybe if I had laid up, I wouldn't have ended up with a double bogey or worse. And, you can't live your life with regrets. And sometimes you have to take a moment, step back and sort of smell the roses, if you will, and not always get worked up just because you hit a bad shot or you made a bad decision. Like you said earlier, you have to learn from your mistakes along the way, and that's how we develop as human beings. And, it reminds me of a conversation. In addition to this program here, I do another one on Tuesday mornings called The Women of Golf. and that's co-hosted with Cindy Miller, who's an LPGA professional. And she was telling the story of Annika Sorenstam, who in turn told a story one time where she found herself getting too caught up in the moment, if you will, between shots. She was just, too focused on golf. And finally she came to the realization that she would hit a golf shot, but rather than getting, too focused on the next shot, she would take time to sort of look around and enjoy, what was going on besides the golf game. And she said she found it actually released a lot of the stress and the pressure that she was feeling. Now, when she got back over the ball, of course, game on again. But then the next, walk between the next shot, again, she would sort of release that energy. And she said what was happening to her beforehand was that she was constantly in a state of tension because she was walking around thinking about every single shot and not allowing herself to enjoy and be in the moment. And I think this is what happens with a lot of golfers. They think about that bad shot that just happened, and they carry it 2 or 3 holes. And by the time they get to, maybe the turn, they've already looked at the first 9, and they're seeing all the bad shots, and they're carrying it to the back 9. And more often than not, they're not going to have a successful back 9 either.
Right. Not only that, to make another point, adding on to your conversation there, it's awful fatiguing, awful tiring to carry that
sure.
thinking each shot like they're talking about. If you carry that stress with you, you'll be spent by the end of the round. With my approach, which is basically what the most effective golfers do, guys like Luke Donald, you see them out there very quiet, good, easy demeanor. They're pretty even keel. They just learn over time. You hit a good shot, that's joy. That's going to elevate your central nervous system too, Ted. You can't have that for very long, whether it's a good shot or a bad shot. You're releasing it. So how do you release it? Let's take, just walking slowly, maybe singing a song, singing to yourself, looking at the flowers, feeling the wind. I always like to feel the wind nearby. I look at the trees, the animals, like ducks are on the water, etc. But you're appreciating the nature around you. It's a great way to release your emotions. Deep breathing or just breathing in and out, a good way to do it too, just kind of having a quiet demeanor. That's a good way to kind of cleanse that soul each shot. Now, when you can do that, Ted, then you're optimistic and ready for the next shot, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Remember, your next shot might be a touch shot. It might be something that's very demanding on the body. You have to allow your mind to be relaxed so you can hit that next shot. Let's take a step away from golf. But what about let's take boxing, for example, or MMA.
Sure.
You're boxing out there. I'm out boxing. If I'm thinking about my next hit punch, I'm dead. You can't be thinking. You've got to be reacting right away. It's got to be automatic.
Right.
So I tell golfers, if you're on the course and your game's not on there, you can't get mad at yourself. You got to go off the course and practice it. Work out your kinks of your golf game off the course so you can take them back on the course. One more thing I want to tell you too, real quick. You made a great point. But ECT is all about taking full responsibility for each part of your game, for each part of your relationship stress, whether it's on the course and off the course. That's very empowering because once you start to do that, you live a full life. You live a life of no regrets. One of the things I do, Ted, is I do speaking for kids in school. So what I have the kids when I do presentations, whether it's kids or adults, I have them teach the process to each other. I don't just talk out there. If I talk for more than 5-10 minutes, people are going to get turned off by anybody, whether it's you or me or anybody else. It's kind of like you need to have that full engagement. He who does the talking does the learning. So you want your participants to talk too, because then they learn more. So I love having my kids, junior high school kids, learn my teen book. You can learn this stuff when you're 10, 12, 14. My darling daughter is just 18, went off to college this year. She got her computer stolen. She left it like 15 feet away from her. Somebody grabbed it. She had all her, she does computers is one of her main part of her coursework as a freshman. She was crying to me, etc. Now I love her at my kid. I wouldn't get mad at her. I said, "Sweetie pie, what feeling did you have there?" Well, she had grief. And I go, "Well, what can we do there, sweetie? What can we do? We can learn from that grief. Next time we can bring that computer a little bit closer to you." Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So you can learn from the sadness. That's all we can do as human beings. Again, if I hit a golf shot into the trees, and I'm sad about it, I got to embrace that sadness, and you know what I got to do? I got to try something different. And the next time I might try my grip a little bit different. Might try my stagger my stance. Might try to tip my shoulders. Who knows what? You just try something different until it works. But the best thing you do is get a good golf pro who's been there before, because they can save a lot of time and energy because they know all the angles. All those things you talked about earlier in your session. Say I heard a little bit about it, but there's wonderful little gadgets out there that people can use. And the pros, the top pros, teaching pros, they've been through most of the wars before, most of the changes you have to do. So it might take a regular, hack golfer 10 tries to try to figure out what's wrong with your swing, but a good golf pro can do it 2, 3, 4 different things, and you're back clicking again, And that's the thing about two of my approaches is good for injuries too. You have injuries, backaches, neck aches, things like that. They all affect your game, so I teach you how to learn from that too. I tell you, most golfers struggle with injuries. There's a lot of torque on the body, especially as you're older, on your hips and your shoulders. So you have to learn to deal with pain, and medications oftentimes they really can adversely affect your game, so you have to be careful about that,
Right, and they a lot of times just mask the symptoms as well. Robert, how can the listeners, if they're interested, get a copy of your book? Where do they need to go to do that?
The best place is Amazon. I think it's on Barnes & Noble too, but Amazon's kind of the top place. I think 60% of most books or more are sold on Amazon, including my book. They can buy a copy there. And then my video is actually on there too, or it's on YouTube. It kind of highlights the process there too, but it's more about off-course relationship stress. And then they could always call me, like at my Lyle office. My number's on my website. So I have a dude. Right. As I said, I train people. One of my passions is to bring this throughout the world to people, because really people are really suffering with emotions, off the course stress. So my passion really is, although I love golf, it's really about helping human beings live a full life, because what really happens is invariably is people get in make poor relationship choices, whether it's drugs, alcohol. And I do a lot of drug addiction counseling for all the courts in the United States, so that's part of my process. But it could be just any type of thing where you get in long-term stress. I've had great stress in my life. That's why I learned from this, and that's why I came up with this approach. My approach uses the best, most effective psychology approaches out there currently in the world. Some are proven techniques to release emotions, so it's very, very credible that way too. And they can always call me. My website has a course description and my video on there, emotionalcoretherapy.com. That's a good place to look at all the credentials and there. And if you're local and even in Illinois, if people out in Illinois, they could come to my live presentation. We're glad to have some athletes there. I'm always collaborating with athletes. I love having them out there. I just had a little tennis player the other day. He was a nice young kid, aspiring player, very good, and I was glad to help him out. Just understand that, what would you tell any golfer that's 13, 14 years old? You know what the wisdom is? Wisdom is learning about these 4 emotions. You're not going to have a free ride all the way to the NCAA tennis championships or the U.S. Open, in golf. You're going to have pain and loss, but you can learn from that. And the trick is to appreciate it and learn from it. That's what my whole approach is about. And and Ted, like you're doing here, I appreciate you having me on the show, because it's a great service. It's really a good camaraderie of good people out there in the golf course. I appreciate the friendships I have and the camaraderie we have with people, and I think you're doing a great job servicing people, and that's my hope, is just to serve people. If I can help people in any way, I'm glad to with golf, and maybe someday they'll teach me some good techniques to get my game a little bit better.
Well, we'll certainly do our best. And Robert, thank you very much for the kind words. And I agree, with you. I think it's important that we do something to help each other, whether it be emotionally or whether there be physical things that we need to do from time to time to help one another. And that's really what this program is about. I try to, golf is obviously my passion. It's something I've enjoyed from a very early age. And I've taught for a number of years, but now I've sort of, obviously I still teach, but now I've decided to create this program and my other program, as I mentioned, that really gears more towards the women's market, but and certainly anybody can tune in. But really what I wanted to do is give the opportunity for really so many great people, and I feel truly blessed. I've had some legends of the game that have been on the show, and some great well-seasoned, as I did tonight, golf professionals out there that are on the teaching side of things, and some young up-and-comers that have been on the program as well that want to get out there and help people with their game. And really, the forum is very simple to put together, and it's a great opportunity for not only the average golfer out there to tune in every week and get hopefully some great tips and hear some great stories and that, but also some other teaching professionals to be able to tune in as well and hopefully learn from one another. And, that's one of the great feedback that I get with this program is I get a lot of the professionals that have been on the show that actually have reached out to me and said, hey, not only did I enjoy being on the show and participating, but I actually learned something myself. And that was really the purpose of my earlier segment, the Coach's Corner. I have that every week, and a lot of times we might field some questions from, from students and things like that. But tonight I wanted to share some of our own experiences with our own students that we may have had, and hopefully some of the coaches and teachers that are tuning in will say, hey, maybe I could try that, or I hadn't thought of that, or yeah, I do that too, or nah, it didn't work for me. But the idea is it's an exchange of information, and that's really what you're doing with the book, is you're exchanging information that can help people, not just on the golf course, but off the golf course as well.
It's a wonderful gift to give to our youth. I'm 53 this year, and I see you're about my age or whatever.
I'm
but you know what?
51, yep.
You know what? It's a beautiful gift we can give to 10, 14, 20-year-olds, whatever, to go out on the course, connect with people, enjoy yourself. It's a great process, and I think that the more we can do things like this to help our young find appropriate self-soothing techniques, whether it's going to the gym, health clubs, any type of sporting to do, as long as they're having fun and relaxation, well, that's a good thing. And if they can take it far to a higher level, so be it. But we're part of that process of serving our young and serving people in the golf community. And I'll say one more thing, too, is there's so many good stories behind the golf game of good human beings out there on the course. You can learn a great deal from the stories behind these people, whether they're CEOs or just it could be anybody working out there. But you know what? When you listen to behind these stories, what are they doing well, Ted? They're coping well with life. They're taking a break from life and enjoying themselves for a good walk or a good exercise. And you can learn a lot as a human being by doing those same things. I'm grateful for what golf has given me as a person. It's given me an outlet to enjoy nature, to get away from the office where I feel a lot of stress when I'm doing my work.
Sure.
Take a little break like going to the gym, and that's a good tool we can have and a good gift we can give to other people too. So again, thank you for your job and your work, and I certainly enjoyed my time here tonight.
Well, I appreciate it, Robert, and thank you. I always enjoy having some good guests, and I've been very blessed to have a number of guests, yourself, of course, among them. And what a great read your book was, Robert. And for those of you, go to Amazon.com. I would suggest you do it tonight and pick up a copy of Robert's book, Mastering the Psychology of Golf with Emotional Core Therapy. It's definitely a worthwhile read. It is not only going to help you on the golf course, and I truly mean that, because it's not all about gadgets and gizmos out there that a lot of us have seen over the years. It's about what goes on inside of us that can help as well. So not only is it good on the course, Robert, but it's good off the course. And thank you, my friend. You're welcome to come back anytime. And I assume you're working on book number 4?
Oh, yes. It's funny that we talked about that. My book will come out in probably February of next year. It'll be on couples. I love helping people learn about love, and it's funny because in my golf book I talk a little about both my teen book and adult book have chapters on couples. It's fascinating to learn how to meet the needs of your partners. One of the best things we can do as human beings is learn to meet the needs of other people in a healthy relationship that brings us support. You know why, Ted? We're all incomplete human beings. We all have emotional, financial, spiritual, physical needs from the time of 14 on. Well, how do we meet those needs best? I think in loving, healthy relationships is a good way to do it, to learn from that and embrace other people. Just like embracing that driver you have in your hand and whacking the ball down the middle, we have to go after those challenges in life. And so that's what I'm called to do, is to serve other people with that and bring good support, bring the world a little bit closer together. Let's not fight as much. Like John Lennon, we're all one, closer together is my whole dream of life, not fight so much.
Well said. Well said. And on that note, Robert, I want to thank you once again for coming on. The book is Mastering the Psychology of Golf with Emotional Core Therapy, and it's author Robert Moylan. Thank you, Robert, for coming on and spend some time with my audience tonight. Thank you. Take care. All right. You have a great evening and much continued success with the book. Bye-bye. All right. Okay. Want to thank all of my guests tonight. The panel, one more time, I want to thank John Hughes, Pete Buchanan, and Michael Wheeler for coming on Coach's Corner panel. I hope you enjoyed that segment tonight, guys. Thank you, as always. And, of course, my special guest tonight was Robert Moylan, who is a great professional in his own right, a little different field, not in the golf business per se, but wrote a great book called Mastering the Psychology of Golf with Emotional Core Therapy. You can get a copy at Amazon.com. I want to thank, obviously, all of the listeners for tuning in worldwide faithfully every week to Golf Talk Live. Thank you very much for all of your continued support, not just the average golfers out there, but thanks for some of the coaches and teachers that tune in every week as well. And thank you for those of you that are able to give some time and come on and share some of your thoughts and input to help grow this great game. Also, I want to thank some special people, Jonathan Laird from South Coast Golf Guide, who I've mentioned many times. Thank you. Get a copy of the guide. Go to www.southcoastgolfguide.com. And if you're interested in advertising, you can email Jonathan at jonathan@southcoastgolfguide.com. Meredith Kirk, thank you as well from Meredith Kirk Golf. Nikki and Tiffany Litherland, thank you for all of your hard work in that and help spreading the word. Mr. Bernie Pinder from Ontic Golf, thank you as well for all of your hard work. Mr. Sean Kelly, owner of linkedgolfers.com. Mr. Peter Doyle from Doyle Solutions over in Ireland. Thank you, my friends. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. And don't forget, I will be back here next Thursday right here at 6 p.m. Central, right here on Golf Talk Live. God bless, and everybody have a great week.